Drawing children is hard. One of my key memories during my time at art school was sitting in my anatomy class as my professor taught, trying to take in all the information on proportions and head measurements and all types of muscles. But at one point, when he was asked about drawing children, his response was, "I won't be going over children because they're basically like little aliens. If you wanted to learn how to draw children, you'd have to relearn everything you know about anatomy." And was he right? Well, yes. There's a reason why there's so little books or videos about drawing children, and it's because they're hard. It's incredibly easy to make a kid look too young, or even worse, make them look freakishly old. There's tons of examples of freaky looking children or babies in media. Even if you can't put your finger on the exact cause, you can always tell when a child looks wrong. And even when I've seen posts of people sharing weird looking children in comics, the people trying to fix it can't seem to get it right either. So in making this video, I had a monumental task in front of me. There's so many ways to draw a child wrong that it's hard to figure out how to get it right. But after doing some research and drawing a bunch of children from real life references, I think I might have figured it out. But before anything else, I wanted to specify that this video won't be extremely technical. So that means I won't really be covering exact proportions when it comes to the head and body. I'll be leaving a video by Sketching Scotty in the description that covers more exact measurements for children, so I'd highly recommend checking it out if you're looking for something more precise. I'll be covering a bit of technical stuff in this video, but I decided I won't be talking about measurements because of a few reasons. Number one being it usually isn't the way I learn best or the way I often think. Number two, being that children are so varied, a 1-year-old looks completely different from a 3-year-old. Actually, even 1-year-olds can look wildly different from each other. Instead of filling this video with hundreds of diagrams showing every age group, I figured it would be better if I took a more general approach to drawing children, covering some general tips for babies, toddlers, and even a bit of teenagers. As you can probably tell, a lot of research went into this video in order to help me understand children's anatomy and present it to you now. And I couldn't have done it without the help of Milanote, the sponsor of today's video. Milanote is a tool for organizing your creative projects, helping you with anything from mood boards to researching specialized topics like I did here. It's like an online canvas designed to help you plan, brainstorm, and collaborate on ideas. As someone who loves organization, I loved using all the tools to help me sort out my information for this video into easy to process sections. I'm able to add links to all my sources with thumbnails that help me remember the content of each link. I've also made subboards inside my main one to sort information into notes for babies, young children, and teens, each with their own information sorted inside. So now I can easily compile all my research into easily digestible boards that contain important anatomical notes, along with reference photos with quotes or small callouts that help me remember their importance. I can even view or edit my boards on the go using the mobile version. It's as easy as just installing the app and using it like you would on your computer. Milanote makes starting a new project easy, with over 100 built-in templates available for every type of creative project. I know a lot of my subscribers are also super into character design, so this illustrative moodboard template would be perfect for compiling reference photos for your next character. And more than other simple collage apps, you can add checklists to track your progress or add notes and links for any additional research you might need. You can also easily share your boards with others for them to edit or just view. I'll be including a link to this board in my description so you can have all my research and sources just in case you want to revisit these tips after this video. Finally, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so sign up with a free Milanote account using the link in the description. Big thanks to Milanote for sponsoring this video and helping me figure this whole thing out. So let's hop right into the video and see how all this research can actually be applied. Like I mentioned earlier, I won't be going into hyper-specific measurements regarding children's faces, but I'll be giving some general tips on how to make a character look younger, as well as some differences between children and adult faces. I'll also show some differences between children of different ages, since children's faces can look wildly different between age groups. I think the first thing I noticed when looking at children versus adults was the head shape. As you can see, babies have a more spherical looking head shape that elongates with age, looking more like an oval in adulthood. As the face of the baby develops, the face gets longer in proportion to the cranium, which has the effect of moving the eyes and brows upward in the head. You can really see it in this comparison photo. See how the eyes on the adult face are higher on the head? This is also why babies are known to have huge foreheads. I read that a baby's face occupies about 1/4 of the whole area of the head, and you can see their facial features are usually set closer to the bottom of their head. Oftentimes I draw babies and young children with smaller chins because of this. Of course, that definitely helps, but it's not necessary in order to make them look like a child. For example, I don't really consider children in a lot of Ghibli films to have exceptionally large eyes. Really, it's about the shape and placement of them. Children often have more round eyes that elongate with age, becoming more almond-shaped. Their eyes also appear to be further apart than adults' eyes because they rest in a smaller head, so I often find myself making eyes farther apart when drawing children. Their eyes also look bigger because of the same reason. Compared to the rest of your body, your eyes actually don't grow that much the more you age. They're fairly close to adult size from birth and grow rapidly your first few months of life, so they look big on such a small head. One tip that has actually stuck with me a lot is one my professor gave me when teaching us differences in age groups. Well, actually 2 tips. The first was if you want a character to look younger, make their facial features closer together. As I mentioned before, a baby's face takes up 1/4 of their head, so they often look like their facial features are scrunched up together more than adults, which are more spread out. I think when looking at differences between babies and toddlers, I also noticed that babies' eyes are usually closer to their nose than toddlers. Toddlers' facial features are still closer together than adults, but I noticed that there's a bit more space between their mouth and nose and eyes compared to a baby. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll have stuff on screen to illustrate that point better and touch on it more later, but essentially the younger you want them to look, the closer their facial features should be to each other. The second tip he gave was that the more lines you add to a child, the older they look. If you've seen some drawings of my babysitter OC June, you might have noticed that whenever I draw the baby he takes care of, I keep the face as simple as possible. Normally I love drawing wrinkles and skin folds, but adding those things to a child will just make them look old. Of course, children have dynamic wrinkles in real life. You can see folds under their eyes or lines when they smile, but I often don't include those things when I draw children because it can easily make them look older. And when I do, I try to make it more subtle or show skin folds through shading rather than through lines. But this benefit also comes from just having a more stylized style. I think to kind of illustrate this tip, I want to show this photo of adult child looking Clark Kent next to a drawing of Moon Girl from another comic. The styles aren't one-to-one, but you can see that the wrinkles in the face make him look way older compared to the minimal approach the artist of the Moon Girl cover takes. Of course, proportion is another big issue in the Clark Kent drawing, but the wrinkles certainly don't help. Again, I think it's better to show wrinkles in children through shading or small lines because I feel like when you draw older characters, you use heavier lines, which gives the appearance of deep-set wrinkles, but children don't have those deep-set wrinkles, so doing it in a more simplistic approach is probably the way to go if you want to include them. I think the last important feature I want to cover is the face shape. Adults have all sorts of different head shapes in real life, and in my face studies video I show how I use different shapes like squares or triangles to draw different head shapes. Children have different head shapes too, but when drawing children you really want to keep their features soft. There's a reason why the term baby fat is so common, as children will usually have less distinct features due to the fat in their face, especially in their cheeks. Usually around their teens is when kids begin to get more defined features, so try to keep younger kids' faces on the softer side. On the topic of underdeveloped features, when looking at a kid from a side view, you'll often notice their chin may not be as defined or protrude as much as with adults. Looking at babies, you can usually see that their chin is recessed and notice how big their cheeks look from the side. Sometimes they also might have a bit of fat underneath the chin, so consider baby fat when drawing a child from all angles. I think that's mostly it when it comes to the head, so I wanted to wrap up this section by drawing a baby, toddler, and teen next to each other. These are pretty rough sketches done from looking at real-life reference photos and all the information I picked up doing research. As you can see, I make the baby's face very close to the bottom of the head and draw everything very simple. The facial features are very close together. The toddler still has the same features as the baby, but I lifted the eyes a tiny bit and elongated the head ever so slightly. You can see that the child still has a round face, but it's not as spherical looking as the baby. And when it comes to teenagers, it's kind of hard differentiating their faces from adults. Puberty is really when the face gets definition, especially in males, so the anatomy is closer to an adult than a young child's. I was aiming to depict a younger teen, taking inspiration from Ellie from The Last of Us and Hiro Hamada from Big Hero 6. From The Last of Us 1 and 2, you can see the differences in her younger self versus older self, and I noticed that her features were a bit softer when she was a young teen. I also made the eyes slightly lower since in some comparison it looked like her eyes were a bit wider and lower on the face. I also looked at Hiro for some inspiration when it comes to drawing stylized teens because I could compare him to the adults surrounding him, noting differences in their facial anatomy. His eyes also seemed slightly lower and his face was much softer. But with that just about closes out the section on facial anatomy. Even if my drawings aren't perfect, hopefully it illustrated how you can make children look older or younger to fit whatever you want to draw, rather than just giving you base measurements for every group or something. But of course, the face is only one aspect, and to fully learn how to draw children, we need to discuss body anatomy. This is the part where I fully agree that children just look like aliens. Children's anatomy is really hard. I still don't fully understand it, and I won't pretend to. But after doing some studies from real-life photos of children, I can give some general tips for drawing bodies. What I think helped me the most first and foremost was thinking about how to break their bodies down. In my anatomy video, I showed you guys my process for breaking down bodies, which involves drawing the body into 3 sections: ribs, pelvis, and stomach. When I draw children, I find it easier to divide their bodies into 2 sections. They still have all the things listed for adults, but I found that dividing the body into the upper and lower half helps keep the box-like shape of children's bodies. Whenever I used 3 sections, it ended up just looking like a short adult. So really, simplicity is the best course of action, and I'd highly recommend doing studies like I'm doing now, where I look at real photos and break them down into simple shapes. Their limbs should also be simple. You don't want to be drawing a buff powerlifting toddler, unless that's your goal, I guess. I just try to keep them as simple as possible, sticking to a more cylindrical shape. Like I mentioned before, kids have baby fat, so I try not to draw their limbs with as much tapering as I would in adults. Honestly, it can be really hard keeping things looking simple and not adding a lot of definition, but just like the face, simple is what keeps them looking like a kid. Another thing I wanted to touch on is the size of the head. A lot of people know that kids look like they have huge heads, but you don't want to make the boss baby mistake of just sizing up their heads to insane proportions to where it looks even bigger than an adult's. If you look at photos of children and their parents, you'll see that kids actually have smaller heads than adults, which makes sense since they're still growing. Their heads just look larger on their body because their shoulders aren't as broad. You can also utilize this in young teens in order to make them look younger than adults. In the examples of teens in media I mentioned earlier, their shoulders aren't as broad as adults, giving them a more youthful appearance and making their head look larger compared to their body. And speaking of teens, a tip my professor gave me was to draw teenagers with awkward anatomy. Teens are still growing into their body, so giving them slightly longer legs or arms can help portray a teen still going through puberty. That's about all I have for the body section. Like I mentioned before, I won't be covering exact measurements since I feel like kids are so varied, but from the research I've done, babies are about 3 to 4 heads tall and children are about 4 to 5 heads tall. Teens might be around 6. In reading from the notes my professor gave me, babies usually have their belly buttons mid-height, whereas children will have theirs above the middle of their bodies. But that's about as far as my technical knowledge goes. My best advice is to do a lot of studies of the age group you want to draw, using real-life photos as a reference and attempting to draw them. What I usually do is trace over the photo afterwards, seeing what I did wrong and using the trace lines to better see the proportions and anatomy. But with that, let's move on to the last section. When it comes to children, sometimes the tiny details are what sells the drawing. In my note boards, I recorded some general features children of different age groups may have, which you can incorporate into your drawings. Not only just things like the shape of the nose, but showing a child with missing teeth or a teen with acne and braces can really help communicate the age of the child you're drawing. Of course, these features aren't exclusive to these age groups, but it's just something general to use. Hairstyles and clothing can also be a great indicator of a child's age and make them actually look like a child. Pigtails are often associated with young girls, and I always think about all the super bright Justice clothing I used to wear when I was younger. Just like how you can look at certain clothes and think of them as grandma clothes, children also have a style you can usually attribute towards them. I think it's always really fun to play into that, and I like using it as a way to add realism to my child characters. And since everyone was a child at some point in your life, you can use your own experience to inform these choices. If I were going by my own childhood, I'd probably make a kid with butterfly hair clips and a wrist full of silly bands. But that's essentially the last tip. I just felt like it would be worth reminding artists that small details are sometimes the most meaningful and can really help sell your child character and make them feel much more real and authentic. And when it comes to things like teens and adults who can sometimes look pretty similar, dressing your teen like a teen can help sell their age a lot better. So those were my tips. I know it might have been a bit unorganized at points, but it was pretty hard figuring out how to cover everything, especially when it came to drawing multiple different age groups. But hopefully you can still get something out of this video, especially because there's a severe lack of information out there regarding drawing children. I wasn't able to find too much, but I'll link what I did find in the description and in my noteboards and all that. I really can't blame anyone for it though, since learning to draw kids is like learning to draw all over again. But that made me want to cover this topic even more. But I hope this video could help even if it's not just exact measurements, because I feel like teaching anatomy, children's anatomy in a more dynamic way would be more useful, I guess, since just knowing some general tips for how to make a character look younger or older can help you portray any age group since they're so wildly different, you know? But if you have any more tips or resources for drawing kids, feel free to leave it in the description or recommend me what topic you'd like me to cover next. I'm super happy to see this channel grow and people appreciate my videos, and I even commissioned a new ending since my old one was just something I did in like a minute and looks super ugly, so hope you guys enjoy that, and bye!